19 and pulling a wide receiver that we really don't need. So,
yeah, I don't want to sound like I'm disagreeing with that because, of course, as you said, nobody's going to go and put money on the Saints making it to the playoffs and or the Super Bowl at this point. I just believe that I don't focus more or less on the Saints at this juncture. I focus more or less on the teams that are around them. And it seems as if no matter how good Atlanta pretends to be, they always seem to leave the door open.
mm-hmm.
And Carolina being who they are, say what you will, a win's a win at the end of the day for all those Saints fans who are much like myself and Ref who are saying they got lucky with that one. Well, okay, but, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. You still got to win. And now you still
definitely.
you still got 2 games with Tampa. You got another game with Atlanta, and you have another game with Carolina. If you can somehow manage to squeeze out those victories, again, this game will be a lot more difficult. It's going to be in Carolina. Of course, Cam Newton won't be coming off, well, hopefully Cam Newton won't be coming off a concussion. So that's going to be a lot different. You don't know what Tampa's going to give you because they may have a chance to get healthy and get some confidence there. They've got a bunch of defenses that they'll be facing that aren't really elite. And, of course, Atlanta's Atlanta right now. They're one of the top offenses in the league. They just went up to Seattle and got jobbed out of a victory. So in the last 2 weeks, I know, a win's a win, a loss a loss. I get that. But in the last 2 weeks, Atlanta has technically beaten Denver and Seattle. That speaks volumes.
Mm-hmm. Well, if we're going to go that route, of course a win is a win. But I think, and I realize that we're in the age of analytics, so it's probably been taken a little farther than it has to be at some points. But there's a lot to be said for really examining the win because, yeah, we can say that a win's a win and that's what ends up mattering. But I don't know. It's tough for me to get excited when we let the Carolina Panthers at home with not a very strong offense, and they certainly didn't have a strong running game, put up almost 40 points. I mean, I just have difficulty taking optimism from that because the Panthers are not the Falcons. The Falcons are the offense that, sure, we're going to get in a shootout and we might lose. I mean, the Panthers, they're the team that usually scores 20 points, 24 points and wins their games, not almost 40. I mean, for them to put up a 40-burger is a blue moon type of affair, and yet when they play Sunday, they look like they had a top 5 NFL offense. And that's why I have trouble just saying, yeah, a W is a W, because in the end, as much as we love Drew Brees throwing 5,000 yards, as much as we get excited about Tom Brady throwing 50 touchdowns, that type of deal, defense still wins championships in this league. And I don't want to keep getting to 7-9 or maybe the first round of the playoffs and just getting kicked out every year. That's just not fun to me. Yes, when I was a young Saints fan 15 years ago watching our first playoff win, it was exciting then because we didn't get to the playoffs and we certainly didn't have success. So it was exciting then. But now I've had a taste of what the real deal is like. I don't get as excited anymore about getting to the wild card round and getting kicked out immediately. And I don't get excited about reaching 8-8 and thinking what could have been. I get excited about what's going to get me back to the Super Bowl to give me that feeling I had when there was 1 million people in the streets of New Orleans screaming "Who dat" when we won. That's what I want again. I don't want to go back to the days where I'm excited to just play and have a chance. I want to get back to where it was legitimate. We are contenders. And I think we have to do that by admitting where we suck and hopefully improving next year. So I can't just take that idea of a win's a win anymore. I've changed my paradigm on Saints football.
And nobody should blame you for doing so. Not at all. And I actually agree with, most of what you said just now. Gone are the days where 7-9, 8-8 were considered a good season. 9-7, I agree with you. But in this particular case, in this particular year, I seem to have shifted just a little bit off of that thought process. Not by much, because I still feel the same way. If the Saints go 7-9, 8-8, possibly 9-7, miss out on the playoffs, and are sitting at home, and all you have done is basically secured yourself to get a lower draft spot when you need elite talent. This is something that we've been preaching here on Who Dat Confessional for some, 5 weeks now for sure.
Mm-hmm.
The Saints need elite talent, and I agree with you there. But I also realize for a team that's in the situation that it's in right now, they may need to be one of those teams that taste that early success. Well, not early success, because I wouldn't necessarily call it a success, but maybe the early false confidence. Maybe this is their alcohol, if you will, because I know a lot of people get on alcohol and all of a sudden they get a false confidence that's not really there and they want to be tough guys. Well, maybe the Saints need that a little bit. Maybe they need to get to 8-8. And maybe the only reason they got into the playoffs is because they backdoored in, or they won the division and they were able to squeeze in through that way. Maybe they need that, because when you take into the fact that you and I have discussed that injuries are injuries, and we're not making excuses. But when you're talking about non-potential starters that have not played and will not play, some will not play. That's a lot to take into account to say your team still made it to the playoffs. And then I know I keep throwing around that P word. And I don't want anybody to get crazy and saying that, B said they're going to make the play. No. I'm saying if there's a backdoor chance for the Saints to experience some success, to build up on and give the young guys confidence, give this team confidence, because let's face it, 7-9 the past 2 seasons, basically since Sean Payton has returned, it's almost every year he's had a historically bad defense, maybe, just maybe, backdooring or sneaking into the playoffs or even into that picture. Maybe that's what they need, because I know what you can't have. You can't have a 6-10, 7-9, 8-8, and miss the playoffs. That I know you can't do, because that will signal 3 straight years of losing and mediocrity that you can't bounce back from. People already were calling for Sean Payton's head. Imagine what's going to happen if he goes 7-9 again and misses out.
Well, look, they can call for his head all day long. You and I both know he's got zero chance of going anywhere. So let's just go ahead and remind everybody of that fact, because that is what that is. That's a fact. He isn't going anywhere unless something catastrophic happens to Tom Benson in terms of ownership, which, going by what's happened in the courts the past year and a half, that ain't happening either. That's all safe in that area. Now, I will say past 2 years in terms of draft have been much more successful. And, I mean, we found people who have contributed. I mean, Kikaha, I know he's injury prone, but when he was healthy, he was there. Pete, everybody was griping at Pete last year. Pete has done very well this year, filling in at left tackle and guard. It hasn't been phenomenal, but for him playing back up multiple positions, he's done a very solid job. Stephon Anthony, he's an up in the air type of guy. Garrett Grayson, we know his story, but guys like PJ Williams in the 3rd round before his injury is playing great. Tyler Davison has a 5th rounder, a defensive tackle who is turning into what could be a starter quality, one technique, run, stop defensive tackle. So to find stuff like that in the 5th round that we're keeping, because let me throw some other names that are 5th round picks at you. Maybe you'll recall them. Guys like Corey White, Andrew Tiller, Ronald Powell, Vinny Sunseri, Matt Tennant, what's another one? Demario Presley. Those are all types of 5th round picks that have been bust or didn't really contribute anything to us for years. That's been something that Peyton and company have struggled with. Ever since we brought in Jeff, and we were real suspect on it, there's been success in the draft, and then we've had a first really strong free agency. And, I mean, where would you put this free agency in terms of success? I'd put this as the best free agents we've had since we brought in, like, Keenan Lewis. So there's a lot of positive that you're saying moving forward. And I think that moving forward is the key words there. I just don't apply that moving forward to this season. I apply that moving forward into this process is going to take a year or more. Not this process is going to have us ready to go by like week 8 when Bro and Rankins are back, and now we're shooting for the playoffs.
The hardest part of this is the fact that the schedule, it bends a little bit in a bad direction for the Saints. And I understand that,
that's a soft way of putting it.
Yeah, that's why you play the games. There's a reason why why you roll out the balls and you say let's go get it done. But the schedule does not favor the Saints to make this this comeback that I was speaking of, because up next you got Kansas City in Arrowhead, always one of the tougher venues to play. But the Chiefs aren't exactly the Chiefs that they've been lately. So there's a chance. The best chance I can say for the Saints to win that game this coming week, and we'll definitely get more into Kansas City in a bit here. But
Mm-hmm.
I think the best chance would be for the Saints to try to keep it as low scoring as possible, much like the New York Giants game. That's the only chance. If you try to get into a shootout in Arrowhead and you get those fans going crazy, it could be a long day. Then, of course, you got the defending Super Bowl champions. I don't care if they lost to Atlanta. I don't care that, the defense was kind of exposed in that game. Let's keep in mind that as bad as the Denver defense was exposed, it was because the Denver offense couldn't put up points. That's why they lost that game. Paxton Lynch wasn't able to do what Trevor Siemian, had done, which is move the ball. Of course, you got another game with Carolina coming up. So, I mean, this could get really interesting for the Saints, as far as this part of the schedule is concerned. And, oh, man, it's going to be crazy. But if the Saints can pull out of this stretch with a favorable record, it could at least a striking distance, if you will. But if they can get in with this striking distance, this could turn around for their favor when you get guys back and healthy, because Rankins, I think, will make a bigger impact coming back than Delvin Breaux will, as crazy as that may sound to some people.
Well, let me throw this out there. One, we'll have to get into that because I actually disagree with you a lot because of how Nick Fairley's doing. I don't think that they'll put him to the side. But let me say this. To remind fans of our next 4 games, listen to this. Not only do we go to Arrowhead, the following Sunday, we have Seattle. Thankfully, that's at home. But then we have to go to San Francisco. And on our way back, we get this team called the Denver Broncos with that amazing defense. Yes, it's in the Dome. But of the next 4 games, you can have Kansas City, Seattle, and Denver. And then San Francisco always plays us tough, no matter how good or bad they are. They play us tough. And then after that, the 5th week that we didn't even bring up, but I am now anyway, on a short week, you go to Carolina. So those next 5 games, and I'm not saying this to be a hater, but I can very easily see that of the next 5 games, we lose 4 of them. And I'm not trying to be pessimistic. I'm simply pointing out the teams that we're facing. The matchups are not extremely favorable for us. The only thing that really is to our advantage is the 2 toughest teams we face are at home. Hopefully that gives Drew Brees enough advantage and positivity and dome field advantage. Hopefully we can start using that word again. Then maybe we can pull off some W's. But honestly, looking at that schedule right now, if you take an unbiased view, it's not hard to imagine of those 5 games, 4 of those becoming losses. So if you did the math on that, that would have you at 3-7. Very fun way to brighten up Pudak Confessional, right?
I'm going to disagree with you because I think the Saints will win 3 of those.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not saying they will. I just said if you look at it, the matchups, I'm picking the Saints to lose those 4 games. Doesn't mean that they can't win. They certainly have a chance, but I'm picking them to lose 4 of them.
And I'm looking at, I think they'll, in that 5-game stretch that you mentioned, and again, it's kind of, what I said prior to leading up, that bend in the schedule is not favorable for the Saints. But when you look at individual matchups, this Kansas City game could be the key.
Mm-hmm.
Because if the Saints can get to 3-3 before they face a team like the Seattle Seahawks and the Denver Broncos, and of course we still got to sandwich in again Carolina, and before that takes place, if the Saints by some stretch of the imagination can go into Arrowhead and win that game, I think advantage slightly bends to the Saints in certain areas. One, I think Seattle will probably be the home game that they lose, not the Denver game. As crazy as that is, because Denver's defense is A1, but I think the problem is going to be the same problem that Denver saw when they faced the Atlanta Falcons. It's the fact that your defense, as good as they are, you have to still be able to put up points. And as bad as the Saints defense is, if Denver can't put up points against them, that's going to be a long game for him, because we've seen Drew Brees get hot. And when he gets hot, he can be surgical. I don't care who your defense is.
Yeah.
He can, especially in the Dome, because, if these games were on the road, I'd say they go 0-5. And I wouldn't even blink when I said that. But being that it's at home, and not the team, Drew Brees at home, different player. So I'll definitely give advantage Saints over Denver, and I'll say as well the Chiefs. I do think they'll beat Carolina on the short week. simply because I think it's a little bit easier to game plan for a division opponent than it is anybody else. If this were a team like the Philadelphia Eagles on a short week or somebody like that, I say the Saints would get spanked, no issues going